Good afternoon and hello. Welcome to Martini's Eco and Country Bites. I'm Martine Shepherd. Please excuse my very croaky. Some may find it quite sexy, but for me, yeah, it's a little bit too much. This is post-flu. Yeah, that was a great little 10 days or so. I know that so many people who were dropping like flies over the last 2 weeks, so my condolences to you. I know exactly how you're feeling, and for those that are feeling a bit under the weather, you just need to rest up. I have a wonderful, passionate, intelligent, wise woman that I am interviewing today, and her name is Bronwyn Holm. She comes from the beautiful state of Victoria, and she's the founder of Earth Food. She's a soil. I love it. I went to say soul. Well, she is that too, actually. She's a soil advocate and worldwide voice for future proofing ourselves physically, mentally, and financially. And her mission is to restore the sacred link between soil, seeds, and soul. There you go. There's that soul back in with the soil. And I think that that says so much about connection to planet. So this is the lovely Bronwyn. She's going to be traveling throughout Western Australia, and today she has joined me here on Martini's Eco and Country Bites. Welcome, Bron. How are you?
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all.
So I'm so grateful that you could join me this afternoon and to share your immense wisdom and knowledge. Certainly, let's sort of take it from the top, perhaps, about how and why you started Earth Food and where it's grown to be, where you're sharing your wisdom and knowledge worldwide, and certainly what brings you to Western Australia, Bron.
Hello. Yes. Well, Earth Food is a nitrifying living soil microbe that under world IP, it can live for up to 10 years in a bottle. That is so unique, and it's probably the only one of its kind. It's not water biome, which is like worm juice as such. And that will only do so much because it lives in the top part of the soil. So if it dries, if we have dry weather, well, that will dry out too and die. Soil microbes are different and they go down into the ground deeply. So under very hot days, they'll just go down. Under very cold days and snow, they'll just go down and they survive. They're the surviving ones. But how they're not surviving on our planet and how they're being killed off is because we have had 100 years or more of exposing our land to the soil, of not looking after our soil, quite happily spray it with desiccating chemicals like a glyphosate, and quite happily not taking care of what we're planting in the ground that takes care of Mother Nature's soil. And that's because we've become so far away from understanding Mother Nature, and it's a spiritual thing too. Like it's a point where we can actually feel a vibration from the planet, or we can feel something that's beyond us, that's bigger than us. We've become so separated, and we'll just
And
take a quick fix.
this is something we just mentioned a few minutes ago, is there is an absolute germ phobia of microbes and bacteria from people, a whole generation that have a total disconnect about the processes that bacterium and biome um, used in the way that's really positive for us, not only in our own gut bacteria and in our homes, which is what the problem is that people aren't being exposed to the healthy types of bacterium, but understanding that the same is this, what is happening in our soils. You know, I grew up in the country, and in our family have DDT poisoning. My grandfather died of DDT poisoning, and of course that attaches to your DNA. So there's a whole bunch of things that knowing what DDT did and glyphosate now, and the ongoing effects generational that's happening. And this is why having some awareness of that puts you way ahead of the game, because you start living your life in such a different way and proactively. Bron. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's wrong with my brain today. Let's talk about Robin earlier. Hi, Robin. I hope you're watching. Um, Now, so if you're going to do an introduction to someone in a community, how would you sum up what you would like to see your role as a facilitator in that learning process for people? How do you help them join the dots there, Bron?
Well, there are two. I have a wardrobe of talks. I have the one that I do in the public, and I have the one that I do in the private, because
Mhm.
the public, as much as I like to bleed into it, like being the canary in the mine, often it's distressing people so much that they can't handle it. So I try to just put a little bit in of what's currently happening around the world with our food and what's going on, how that's made. And I have a talk there that's what did your food eat to become food? And it explains how that process works and how so many parts of our existence today is being to as part of a business repeat model in big pharma is part of what you've just said, and that is our nervous systems are breaking down, our brains are breaking down under the glyphosate use, of which we are spraying way more than what we did in Vietnam. So that's just a domestically speaking. Um,
Mm,
and then I have the private talk, and that's when I talk about things of, well, it's like, well, how come these things are happening when it's actually against the Constitution? Where are these names of these particular agencies that are taking stand over our soil, our seeds, our food, our land, our houses, and nearly our souls? So
mm,
yeah, it's a but I think sometimes I've been talking in groups. There's one particular one I remember down in southern New South Wales. There, they were so lit. They just it was a pleasure to speak with
yeah.
them because they were already on the page, which then meant I could elevate it into another level. Because at
Mm,
the end of the day, I have usually 1 hour at the most, sometimes half an hour, and I've got to pack it in with where people are at. But at least
yeah.
by the end of that talk, I do have a saying that says, well, now you know, you cannot not know. And now it's personal choice. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And one of the hashtags I like to use on my social media is stop the rot, because we are being caught up in a rotten plan that is destroying all the things that we used to know. For example, my background is a natural history educator, and I know the natural history of Australia is singularly peculiar to any single thing on the planet. We are unique, not just as a people and culture, but we are unique in our animals, our flora and our fauna. Our
Mm,
fauna is being wiped out. We've got trees that are just being burnt away. They've been flooded away. The seeds are washed away. And most parts are not coming back to anywhere near what they used to, because they can't. The soil is bastardized. And with all of these floods that we're having, it's a toxic chemical soup that gets washed away through waterways all over the land. Well, it's not helpful if you don't have Mother Nature's repair toolkit in the soil to take care of those chemicals, those metals, whatever, those things that are hurting the soil, the biome, whatever's left of it,
yeah.
the trees, well then, and the grasses, the tall grasses and the waterway grasses and all the things that are designed to hold the skin of Mother Earth together, well then we don't have it. So
Mm,
we have more areas of drying out and topsoil, our topsoil being found over in New Zealand. And at the same time, with these floods, like the southern flood that we had that went from basically along the bottom of the state of Queensland, where the farmers in that whole region had lost everything.
Yeah.
Now it's at the point where these farmers, 1 in 3 farmers, are not coming back because they can't even decide whether they're going to buy toothpaste today or an extra grain for their chickens that they've just had to buy because their chicken farms have been washed away, the beehives have been washed away, their infrastructure, their rigs, their sheds, their seed bank, whatever it is they had, is
Their
all
entire
gone, and the
livestock
food
too.
bowls are gone. Mm.
Yeah. You know,
And the
there's one
droughts,
thing that if you lose your crops, but when you lose stock and they are taken away by floods or they drown, then you're in a situation where you don't have some form of instant income. Like a lot of farmers will off sell or say, like let's sell off some cattle or some sheep or whatever it may be. So when you don't have that and you've lost your crops as well, you've lost both, then we're coming to the point now, as you know, insurances have been modified to not have to pay out on this kind of stuff now. And this is where farmers, who I've been trying to tell for a decade now, it's time to wake up, stop allowing this government to just do whatever it wants to do. Bronwyn, do you know that, has there been much I'm trying to work out how to phrase this, but in your travels and through those conversations that you're having, not only in the country, but obviously in the city too, do you find there's a huge disconnect in the city to food production, how it's produced, and what ends up in the shop? Because I find that more and more. Are you seeing that in the large cities when you're traveling?
Absolutely. In fact, it's really funny because I will have come out of a country regional area where I've done some talking or even an emergency farmer meeting. And what amazes me is I'll just drive it's almost you come in off like the M1 or the Augustus Highway or the
Yeah.
Mitchell Highway, wherever it is. And all of a sudden you just see houses and industry, and there's no longer that farm on the side of the road or that big pile of grain under the blue tarp. It's like now we've got buildings and parks and even water, fountains and so on. And then where do you get the food? Well, you go into the big food distribution channels by brand. And, well, has anybody had a look where that food comes from? Because
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, go into the freezers. You've got frozen food from France, from Vietnam, from Thailand. You've got frozen fish from Vietnam, Thailand, Norway. You've got foods that have been frozen in South America that are in there. Heaps from, you may even find the odd one from the UK. There's no frozen Australian food there.
Very little.
Very rare do I see
Very
something.
little.
And then when you go into the fresh food section, what do you find? Well, not much of it is coming from our Australian farms. And I always have said, if it's grown here, we don't import here. And here's the problem. Our Australian farms have to pay a high level of tax. They have to pay for a health, work and safety programs and special insurances for this and that, and permits for the council of this and that. And if they're organic, well, whoa, watch out for that bill.
Yeah.
And, and in the middle of all of that, in comes a product from overseas, and they don't have any of that. So they're cheaper. Our structure of keeping these divisions of food and so on is so expensive. And that's why the farmers are kicked out of the basically at the bottom of the selling and buying platforms. It's just not working. And then we have all these industries and like the Farmers Federation and the Wool Board and the Wheat Board and the Sugar Board, and it's their job to actually syndicate the farmers' property and get the best deal in the world pricing and get the exports happening. Well, I can't see much of how the farmers are winning on that one. There must be a lot of money going through somebody's bank account somewhere. It's not coming back. It isn't coming back to where it first originated from.
Absolutely.
And so on.
Farmers used to have a reputation of being really wealthy. I just remember that. It always used to make me laugh. I'm like, yeah, they probably were for the first 2 weeks that they got the money from their grains in a lot of the places that I grew up. And after that, they'd be like, oh, well, we can maybe we got a little bit more in the kitty there, but they'd have to budget for the next 2 to 3 years. And people don't know how to budget from month to month, let alone budget like a farmer does, where he's got to anticipate what's going to be happening with influence of weather patterns and fluctuating markets. And so what they have to endure, people can't even fathom. And that's one thing I will say, is that resilience of farmers is incredible. However, that's the one thing that's gone against them, is because they have become so tolerant and resilient that they expect to be kicked in the guts, and they have been pushed down, and they have been sent to the wall, and instead of raging against the machine like I would be telling them, they kind of sat back a little bit too much. And this is where now we're in a situation where we are losing food security in this nation, and people don't quite get that. And I'm like, yeah, I saw this coming a long time ago. I've been yelling and screaming about this, and since I started Martini's Eco and Country Bites, I have been saying time and time again, farmers, don't give up your sheep and your cattle and your wool and any of that. It's definitely going to turn a corner, but unless you stand your ground and push back against this government and against this insanity, which is all driven by foreign corporations and foreign companies and policies. We know that's the big caps there. So, we talk about capitalism, and certainly it's about
I want
foreign.
to add something to that statement, Martine, if I can. The problem is we are way too comfortable using our after-tax money to buy food and products that have been brought into our country, and that money goes overseas to some high profit corporation in another country. Our economy flatlined 2 weeks ago, and that tells me there's nothing going on here. It's because it's all going out the door. We're leaving money on the table. We're not looking after each other. We're not looking after the small farmer or the butcher, the person who makes the secondary product from primary products, and so on. The big corporations, the big food distribution channels. We've got I'm just going to name them. You've got Spotify and the programs that we're using on our phone by subscription, and bookings.com and Airbnb, Temu, Amazon, eBay, and then you go into Spotlight and Officeworks and so many Bunnings and so many of these big corporate chained brands. We've got nowhere else to buy things. We've kind of got ourselves in the back. If you want a printer, where do you go? If you want a zipper for your dress that you're making, well, where do you go? Some of us may have the time to go through a secondhand store and find an old dress and maybe recycle and upcycle. A lot of us can't or won't. And this is because we've been indoctrinated now that there is no place to go, because the advertising on the TV has hypnotized us to think we won't go to the small store that might sell that very thing that you're looking for, or that little antique place that's around in the next town that you might go into the next time you're traveling. We've gone away from what used to be easily accessible in small towns is now in big cities under big 2-story logos as the entry to a building. And that means we don't have anything here that's ours. And there was a really good post someone put up fairly recently about every single thing that he touched had nothing to do with the land he lives in. And he was dead set true.
Yeah.
And we continue to do that, even though now we know we still do it. And I think this is a problem. If you're buying food that comes in a box, bottle, or a tube, not only are you most likely buying from an overseas corporation, but you're also buying food that's engineered. It looks like food and tastes like food, but it's actually poison, and it's
Yeah.
killing us slowly. Our joints are tightening up. I'm 65, Martine, and I know so many people my age who've already had a hip replacement, a knee replacement,
Yeah.
have some kind of autoimmune disease, have high inflammation, high heart incidence of problems of sorts, and they're all sitting there watching TV. Now, when we watch TV, we go into an altered state. An altered state that is a form of hypnosis. So suggestions could be done in an altered state that you can take on as part of your thinking or believing. And this is, I think, the problem. I think they call it programming on television for a reason, because I think we have all been hoodwinked. And here we are. We've got our backs to the wall. We do not have choices anymore. And in the future, the food that we will be given is not what you think it is. It'll be engineered, designed perfectly for the way the behavioural science of humans, in our era, would appreciate food. We've also got in South Australia, there is this new farm that's growing leafy greens that is being immersed under pressure in a solution that has mRNA, and that can go into your big food distribution channels without a label. We have industrial chemicals put on food by the famous BG, who insists that that's really good to have an avocado looks the day it was picked to be 2 years old and be exactly the same. And on and on and on it goes. Citric acid, a mold, a manufactured highfalutin mold substance. It's not with lemons. I don't know what people think that is. You can look that up, what it is. It is a poison. We have high inflammation. We're absolutely cooking inside. Our joints, as we get old, our ligaments are toughening up, are thickening up, based on the fact of the inflammation. And this inflammation comes from the sugary sweets, sweet drinks, even food that you think should just be food, like bread. When my grandmother would make it, it would be flour, yeast, bit of salt, bit of water, chuck it in the oven, and Bob's your uncle. Well, today you can buy bread with 30 ingredients. Like, what the? And that's just the basic. Here's one, milk. We used to have milk from the cow. Had big hunk of cream on the top, so we'd shake that in. Well, what a lot of people don't know is the molecules of that milk has a hook on it, and that hook is the part that goes and helps the cream float to the top. When it's homogenized and pasteurized, that hook gets straightened out. That's why the cream can't float to the top. It's mixed in, well, what it's supposed to be, but it's mixed into the milk. Well, because of that molecule has changed. That's a GMO aspect to milk. Well, GMO does not mix with our DNA.
No.
And that means that it creates this slime in our intestines, particularly our bowel. And for those of you who've done a detox, and you'll notice that the heap of mucus that comes with that detox, that is all of that gunk that's made because we have milk that's been altered. And look, I could be here for 3 days, Martine, and I still will not be able to get through the list of things of what is happening and why we just need to go back to basics. We're going to need to review or try to remember what our grandparents did. I've got all my grandparents' tools that have no power to use. My grandmother's cooking equipment, no power to use. I've got my camp ovens and whatever that I can use quite easily. We're going to have to start looking at how we're sleeping, what is around us. This frequency thing that's going over our country right now is absolutely appalling. That is, we are a frequency
People don't
within
understand it.
ourselves. Yeah. So our frequency, so earth food, living microbes, has a frequency of 7 to 12 hertz. And you spray that on the ground and you can lie on it and you can reset your nervous system in 20 minutes because it's in alignment with the frequency of the earth. And that's also the same alignment of when bees vibrate to make the honey antibacterial, which, as we know, lasts for 1,000 years in a pyramid. So this is the things of stuff that make us tick as a humanity and that makes the planet as it is. We are the only kind of our planet in this stratosphere that we know of. And here we are. We're pretending like we've got 100 of them that we can just pop off to if this one's not suitable.
I think more than anything, we're allowing corporations to come on in and impose themselves above us, that everyday human rights don't exist above corporate rights. And this is where it needs to flip around, where our so-called perhaps elected, I'm not sure, that's very questionable, elected leaders are actually representing us in our nation and not the corporate puppets that pay them behind the closed doors. More than anything, I think that we discussed that having strong communities that know how to seed share and harvest and seeds and keep seeds, seed banking. This is something that I grew up this way, but for me, it's something that when you can share and impart some of that knowledge and break it down about what does make a strong community, and having that connection with food and getting communities organized so that perhaps that people aren't just growing all food that's the same, but that they could be sharing this. What are some of the things that you do as far as we're looking at doing a talk next week, so next Thursday. So for those that are in the Perth area or are going to be around, would like to come and attend, myself and Edge Radio are going to be hosting a night with Bron next week in Mount Lawley, and we're going to be sharing and imparting as much information in the way that people can take away their Bron, where they can apply it to their everyday lives, so that it's applicable not only in the city but other communities. I'm lucky. I live in rural communities, so for me, this is my daily life. Like collecting the eggs and going and getting the avocados and the lemons and all of that stuff, and collecting and sharing that as well. So that's part of my everyday existence. But there are a lot of people that don't know how that works, and perhaps that is something that would be great for them to learn more of. What would be your basic tips for people that are wanting to be more sustainable at home? And what would be the things that you would say to them, how to look at your soils, get it tested first, that kind of thing? What would you suggest?
Well, this is not a sales pitch here. This is just really biology. When you have living soil microbes, they repair whatever damage is in there. We can use these on an end-of-life mining site and it can bring it back perfectly fine in 18 months. And we know that. And the problem is that the soil is in trouble. So, but just putting the Mother Nature's microbes back into the soil. I always like this one phrase in the book of Jeremiah. God said, I gave you a garden of Eden and you turned it into an abomination. And well, here we are. All we're doing is putting the microbes back. That's it. This is not a product. It's not something we've made in labs and, carted around, and I can repeat this in China and make it cheaper, and hopefully we'll make, $60,000 billion out of it. That's not this game, guys. If I had that money, I'd be doing something else. But the thing is this, we we only want people to put the microbes back on their square meter of earth as living occupants on this planet. It's now our duty. But, you know, here's the thing. You look after Mother Nature and she will do everything to take care of you. And we have seen miracles upon miracles. I have had people contact me where they've made broccoli sprouts with the earth food microbes, and they have a high level of sulforaphane. It's a compound that's generated with the marriage of the two plants and microbes, and that actually kills cancer. And we've had women who've been on the medical medium diet where they need to have 3 whole bunches of celery 3 times a day, like 1 celery 3 times a day. And when it's grown with living microbes, your food has high density nutrition because that's the way of Mother Nature. And because of that, they can actually repair themselves from quite ill diseases. In fact, one of my favorite customers, to this day, she still buys it and she still does that. And she actually now is in remission for about six years now. And every time we see her at one of our fairs or shows, it's a big love fest and tears. And it's exciting, you know, it's exciting when people can win a battle. So what I do is I like to think that by the time I've left a community, that they're already inspired to join together and to perhaps be the medicinal gardening club of their region, or or maybe they're going to work together to have edible seedlings that they're going to sell outside of an area, you know, in town on a Saturday morning, and they will make some really good cash money out of it. Because, like, for a long time, we've been talking about gold and silver and all of these things to prepare for the future. But I can tell you what, you can't eat it, and you need the water and you need the food. They're your vitals. Everything else is luxury after that. You know.
Absolutely. And food security is one of those things that even I've seen people have, you know, fairly small blocks, but they're able to grow in such a way that they are able to get huge yields out of very small areas, and that's because they have put so much good nutrients and bacteria and biome back in the soil and brought it back to life, like it's living soil. You know, so much soil, you look around and it's like it's dead pretty much. It's everything is that grows on it is just a weed that will exist on the most basic sand.
Well, this is it. I've been talking to clubs around here in Perth this last week, and that's saying, "Oh yeah, Bronwyn, but we're on a sandbar here." And I said, "Do you know what? Here's the answer for that." And I put them through my basic biology class, which is a grade 7 biology class, because no one knows it. And I would probably be arrogant to say I don't even think agronomists might even know about it. But anyway, that's me.
Yeah. My friend dear Kev, the farmer who has been on my show previously, we talked about how perhaps we need to engender this reconnection back to food and from city back to the country, where food production is this essential primary industry for the rest of the nation. And people just take that for granted. They think that from here something just magically appeals at Woolworths. And I said that, and we both talked about how perhaps country regional areas could be hosting city kids to come and get more connection back to food and teaching them how to do this again, because I feel just across the board that the disconnect is something that we all have to take responsibility for, that we do need to educate our future generations with, because at this point we are a generation who doesn't know how to create or be self-sufficient in any point. You talked about that before. We have become a nation of consumers and no longer producers or manufacturers and creators. And that was all by design, is to destroy all of our manufacturing. Well, if we continue with this failing intermittent green renewables that we have right now, and I'm all for the the real renewables that are super green, actually let's go to free energy is what I want to do, is bypass all of that garbage altogether, because that's what we deserve. We've been ripped off for long enough. If we go to intermittent energy supply from weather reliant industries, we are going to be a nation that cannot have heavy manufacturing. And that's the one thing that I've had this conversation at Parliament House. And this is another thing that people don't comprehend, is that without having good sources and reliable power supply, you tell a country person or a farmer that the power is going to be out for 4 to 5, 6 days or a week because there's a storm, which is kind of normal up there sometimes. They know how to get themselves back on track with their own Jenny and stuff like that. But across the board, if this is what we're looking at, we've got some sad times ahead if this should go ahead. What would you suggest in light of this reconnection back to city and country with your travels? What have you seen those dialogue that meet somewhere in the middle to bridge that gap? What have you seen, Bron, that you could share that on?
Yes, I would like to say to just have your own little patch or your pots on your veranda or your balcony. Even medicinal herbs is helpful, but it's about being in a group. I have to say it's too hard on your own, and if you think that you can't make it in a group, for whatever reason, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
People who have something to do with Mother Nature are usually the most generous, kindest souls you can have friends with. I love going to the old gardening clubs, where they're all 80 years of age and making their funny little, I don't know, their scones and whatever.
Jams. Yeah.
But you know what? They treat me like a daughter, you know, and it's the old school. Everybody's welcome, open the door. Here's your cup of tea, sit down, have a chat. And, some of these clubs, they call themselves a gardening club. They're actually not. They're a social club. They're a club for people for somewhere to go
Connection.
once a week or once a month and have that connection. It's the connection. It's we are isolated. I know so many 30-year-olds who live their life through a game. This gamification has taken over their lives. That's not living, guys. That is existing. And we need to get our hands dirty again. With Earth Food, we have the Mycobacterium vaccae in it, which is the natural antidepressant. You can breathe that in. You can actually have that in your pots, in your bedroom, and it will generate an extra 40% more oxygen just by having chocolate brown fertile living soils with those microbes. Now, that's really useful to know. You get high density nutrition. If you pick your lettuces from your pot or your plant or your patch and put them on your plate, you get 40% more protein just by doing that. You have the minerals in there because that's what microbes do. They unlock all the minerals in the soil to feed the plant for us to eat. That's the way Mother Nature intended it to be. Not food grown in labs on a solution and has no nutritional value, and that's a stat I talk about in my talks. Look, it all comes down to personal choice now. Where at this point you're either going to be on this change or you're not. If you're not, well, then you're part of the problem. And I have to say, if you're still using pieces of plastic to buy things that come from overseas countries all over Australia, wherever it may be, they're also part of the problem. You're shortchanging, you're literally ripping off the future. There is no coming back from this. And I want you all to know there is no tomorrow if this continues, if there is no interruption. We are
and we
we
do
are the
need to be
canary
that.
in the mine right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that Luckily, there's a lot of very noisy canaries. That's the one thing I'm very grateful for, as I am aware. I know quite a few of them actually. That the noisy canaries that are out there just going, we've got problems, Houston, and we really need to sort this out. So looking at reconnecting and perhaps what we'll be covering next week with your beautiful talk in Mount Lawley. That's Thursday, the 26th of June. It's going to be 7 to 9 p.m. So again, your mission is to restore the sacred links between soil, seed, and soul. And I think that connection back to Mother Nature, what we nourish our bodies with, and how soul food, when it's cooked with so much love, actually enhances what we take into our bodies. And that's where you were talking about, you were so loved in those communities and given food that was made with love that you felt nourished. And this is where I think this disconnect and lack of nourishment of our souls comes from, because I think it's all designed to disconnect us from our true essence and spirit as human beings.
Yeah, that's true. We're at a poignant time in humanity's timeline, and I sometimes have great fear, and then there's a part of me that says, "Fear not," because I was a student of Buckminster Fuller, and before he died, he said he really believed it would happen at the 11th hour, but we would make it through. But it's not going to come cheap. And what really
I think we're
bothers
about
me is that
2 minutes, 2 seconds to midnight then.
pretty
It's
much.
11th hour.
Well, also too, like we're seeing change. We're seeing people who can, those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, and they're the people who I think will pull it over the line. There are many who can't. I can't tell you what may happen, but all I know is I'll give it a back. I'll back myself and I'll have a crack, whatever it is. I'll talk until I cannot talk anymore, and I'll speak on this same topic over and over with anyone who's sitting still long enough to listen. And it's not
Beautiful.
because I think I'm a legend in my lunchbox. I don't. I actually don't care about things of this world. I really care about future-proofing my nation. Out of all things, I love Australia, and I love it the most.
Bronwyn, have you written a book that is a great breakdown and joins a lot of these dots for people so that they can kind of come back and have a reference point also?
I've just finished writing a small booklet. It takes so long. I need help.
Call out to our family here. Anyone that would like to assist Bron? Call out.
And an editor. I do need an editor. Anyway,
Well, you're in the
I'm just looking and I'm thinking I'm going to have to dash pretty soon as well. We've got another show, another talk to do, and I've got about a 2-hour drive, so I'm going to hit the frog and toad, dare I say, as a true blue Aussie.
beautiful. Thank you for joining
Very
me, and I
soon.
look forward to next week. Again, for those that are interested to come and listen to this incredible wisdom and advice, even for perhaps people that have specific questions afterwards to you, Bron, is next Thursday, the 26th of June. It's going to be 7 to 9 p.m. in Mount Lawley. The details will be on Edge Radio Australia. And following this, Bron, thank you for joining me today, and I can't wait to speak about this more next week.
Thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, Bron.